Yo, what's shaking, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Orange Bloods Modcast here on the Orange Bloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Geoff Ketch. I'm joined by Alex Anwar. No Sukamel today. He's in Big Sky Country eating chili with beans.
Hopefully not being eaten himself, right? Hopefully not being eaten himself. Right?
Hopefully not being mauled and eaten by a bear. Should he be eaten and mauled by a bear, though? Cole Patterson, Orange Bloods recruiting analyst, joining us for the first time on the Modcast. Welcome, Mr. Patterson. It is a debut. You've moved up in the Orange Bloods mod rankings when you can slide into our little four-pictured Modcast. How goes it?
Yeah, I'm excited. I guess I have to pick up Sukamel slack today, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, Orange Bloods community, this is Cole. In the event that you've never seen his face before, there is that lovely mug. Fellas, it's a bye week, so it doesn't feel life or death in the sense that Texas is on a 2-game losing streak and the season feels at a major crossroads in the sense that it's hard to know what Texas is truly playing for at this point. It's hard to know what this season is going to be remembered for. There is weirdly not a ton to play for in these final 5 games, and yet it feels like there will be everything to play for in terms of continuing momentum, making sure recruiting doesn't slide because of anything that would happen, on the field. Alex, I'll start with you in this sense. Oh, by the way, everybody, find the subscribe and get noted, click the bell, ring the bell, and make sure that you leave comments and like the video, all that stuff. Alex, after watching the film for the last 3 or 4 days, what's your big picture takeaway of just where do you think this team is, given that there's always so much to talk about with this team, and so much of it is always about what isn't right and what's not happening with the team as much as what's going on right?
Well, I felt like there were some answers on defense. Clearly with the defense last week, I mean, there were points in the game where you just looked and you said, what was that call? Or, how is this happening? Or why does it feel like at the end of these games, this team just collapses defensively? And, whenever you go back and you really watch it, I mean, what Sark said, I know that press conferences are just coach speak stuff, but, that they really weren't, like, it really wasn't complimentary football. 22 snaps for the Texas offense that were non-punt snaps. I believe 44 non-offensive punt snaps for Oklahoma State in the second half. I mean, it just says it all. We all know the Catch. You probably know the stat off the top of your head about total yards in the fourth quarter. It was like, did Texas have like 2 yards? And I
think it was like 143 to 1 or 170 to 1 or something like that.
Whatever it was, Texas had like 1 or 2 yards, right? It was just, I mean, things went haywire. Things went off the rails, and I don't think it was the defense's fault as much as it was the fault of what was happening with the offensive line. It was a mishmash group. They kept rotating dudes in. And man, I don't know if you guys talked about it. I didn't get to watch your podcast earlier in the week, but to me, Casey Thompson didn't look right. Something in the second half. I couldn't tell if it was that right hand. You remember that bobbled snap deep in Texas territory on that first failed 3-and-out possession where they started out maybe on their own 2-yard line? That thing could have been a whole lot worse. That was a perfectly fine snap by Jake Majors. There was something wrong with his right hand on that play. Then there was the play where he gets busted into smithereens. And from there, it's just like there were some decisions he made and some errant throws and some misreads on just RPOs where Casey never misses. And even some misreads on like easy, just zone read pulls at the mesh point. I don't see it as anything that, as far as with Casey Thompson, I feel like I'd be interested to hear what you guys think, if that's something that you feel like is going to continue or whether it just felt weird and Twilight Zone-y. I worry more about, finding the answers along the offensive line at the right guard. Is it going to be Tope Imade? Is it going to be Hayden Connor? And at the left tackle, will it continue being Christian Jones, or is Texas going to really maybe mix in Andrej Karic over there? Texas has 3 offensive linemen that feel like they're locked into their roles. And, man, whenever you really depend on a guy like Bijan Robinson to be your offense and you can't generate movement with that offensive line because whatever it is, the inner workings of them aren't coalescing in the ways that you would like in the zone game, you're gonna have trouble icing off opposing defenses in the second half of football games, and we've seen that crop its head up over the course of the last two.
Anwar, listening to Alex, it just made me realize how unsettled so much of this team is. That, you get ready to go into the home stretch of the season, and I'm listening to Alex talk about essentially it's hard to know who should be playing both on offense and defense in certain areas. It's a team that these coaches have got to figure out over these last 5 games.
I mean, they have to figure it out. It's hard to do that in the middle of a season and find a ton of success, right? Because, you basically are saying, all right, well, when this fails, then we'll do this. And when this fails, we'll do that. And, that's not really the greatest formula of success, right? That just means a lot of trial and error. These are things that you would have hoped was figured out beforehand. You would have thought that watching the film from last season should have, helped with the evaluation process. And then, I think the staff has got to figure out ways, I believe, going forward to really figure out what they've got in a practice setting, Ketch, because it's clear that the practice setting has been somewhat deceiving in certain areas to the staff. Like, I think they've placed okay, this happened in practice, we're good. And then the live bullets start flying, and all of a sudden they realize, oh snap, we're not good. So they've got to figure out better ways to evaluate the talent that they have. And to your point, Ketch, over the next 5 games, it's crazy because as Texas sits here at 4-3, and just piggybacking off of what Alex said and kind of building on it, they would have to win. It's a simple math, but you got to win 5 straight just to get to 9 wins. So four puts you at 8. 3 puts you at 7. And they've got 3 road games, and we know they haven't particularly played well on the road. So it's going to be really interesting how this whole thing shapes out, Ketch. But them trying to figure it out on the fly and figure out who's who, while you give them kudos, you got to figure it out. It's a little scary that we're 7 games in the season and there's still a lot of question marks.
Cole, I'm going to come to you in a second, but I wanted to ask this as a follow-up to everybody, actually. This team has its problems. And if you eliminate the wins and losses for a moment, like it's issues on defense or it's issues on defense, and it's issues on the offensive line and the way it's performed at times in a few ball games. It's still historically one of the best offenses in school history, but it hasn't performed in its biggest games at the levels that it wants to. But they should have beat Oklahoma, and they should have beat Oklahoma State. So this is a team for me that should be 6-1. They're not. You are what your record says you are, and you're 4-3. How different would we talk about this team if they'd had the collapse against Oklahoma, but found a way to win it a little bit like they did in 2018, and they'd found a way to not completely give it up against Oklahoma State? Are we, I guess, with our critical eye, what doesn't seem as important at that point if a team is 6-1 and in the top 10, right? Because there's fine margins with what is a crisis and what is something that you can live with. Is any of the stuff that we're talking about, does it go away if they're 6-1? Are we still this critical? Or, I don't know. That's what I'm asking. Because I feel like they could easily be 6-1 right now, and we would be talking this team up, but all of its problem areas would still exist.
If you're 6-1, you're not going to get any critical talk from anybody, man. Ketch, winning cures all, right? It's like we'd be talking about how, hey, they got these problems, but geez, they overcome them. What a hell of a team we got here on our hands that we're dealing with. I think that's how it's just, I think it would be, the same issues would exist, but they would just be framed differently, right?
You'd be talking about how great the coaching staff is at being able to mask
or the resolve of the team, or just like whatever. Yeah. But, I think that, as far as the critical infrastructure of the actual team, if it was what it was and the injuries occurred as the injuries occurred and the rollout was exactly the same, but just those 2 outcomes were different. I think structurally you'd have the same issues, but they would certainly be framed in a different way. And I think that in that case, it would also be something where, you know, we wouldn't necessarily look at it as causal, and so we might not see it as big an issue.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Cole, of all of the stuff, welcome back, by the way. Of all the stuff that we're talking about, this is like my first chance to really get your view on some Texas football matters. So I'm curious, is there a most egregious, most concerning part? Because there's things on both sides of the ball, although Alex makes a point. I think that most of us would have. The defense did enough on Saturday that they probably should have been, just like the offense the week before walks away saying, hey, we scored 48. That should be enough. The defense could kind of say, hey, we held them to 0 touchdowns offensively through the first 3 quarters. That should mean something. Is there a most concerning thing for you?
I would say probably the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. It just seems like the offensive line gets manhandled when push comes to shove. We saw that in the Arkansas game. We saw that in the second half of the Oklahoma game. They can't really get a push. You know, Bijan Robinson gets shut down in those second halves, largely because of that. Defense can't really get any pressure on the quarterback. So that's what stands out to me, and I think that's what's keeping them from winning those games. But you mentioned what the criticism would be if they were 6-1. You know, they'd be in the top 10. Bijan would be on his way to New York. There'd probably be a lot of recruiting momentum, and just from a recruiting perspective, Sarkisian would have been able to sell them on like, hey, we're doing this without my players and without the guys to fit my scheme. He's still doing that to an extent right now, but it's kind of hard to sell that as much when you blow, 2 leads, you get manhandled by Arkansas on the road. So I think if you want to look for a positive with the record, I think Sarkisian's able to sell recruits on, hey, we need you to step right in and you're going to get some playing time. Evan Stewart can be that guy opposite of Xavier Worthy. Devon Campbell sees an opportunity to play immediately on that offensive line because of all those struggles. So, to answer your question, I think the line of scrimmage is the biggest, obstacle they have to overcome to maybe win 5 more games to get to 9 wins or 4 games to get to 8 wins.
Cole, it's funny. I don't know that I had thought about this until, for those of you that don't know this about Cole, before coming to Orange Bloods, he was holding down the Mississippi State sports front as well as anybody in the industry, football, baseball, all of it, right? So you've been watching an SEC brand of football. It's funny, when Texas played Arkansas, I think a lot of us were like, whoa, Arkansas is impressive on, both sides of the ball in the area that we're talking about, lines of scrimmage. It was like, those dudes look like grown men in ways that Texas doesn't normally see in the Big 12 week in and week out. Having seen that game and seen so much of SEC football over the course of certainly the last few years, on a scale of like how normal, because I think this is the big question, right? When Texas goes to the SEC, whatever that is, how ready are they in specifically this area of the trenches? Is what Arkansas has in your mind up front on offense and defense at the line of scrimmage, is that normal run-of-the-mill SEC stuff? Are they on the higher end, if not elite? Like, as someone who's covered the SEC a lot and has seen a lot of SEC football, the Arkansas group that kind of manhandled Texas earlier in the year, where would you rank that inside the world of the SEC? Yeah,
I mean, I was definitely not expecting Arkansas to play as well and dominate that game as much as they did. But, I mean, they don't have any, elite talent on that defensive line. It's going to be a first-round pick or anything like that. But Sam Pittman is a great offensive line coach, and he always gets the best out of his offensive line. So that doesn't surprise me that they are able to control it on that aspect of the game. I don't want to say they're the elite of the elite on either side of the ball in the SEC, but it is standard, I mean, it's kind of cliche to talk about the SEC being more physical than the Big 12 or the Pac-12 or ACC, whatever you want to talk about. But it's pretty true. Just that's where all the big D linemen, big offensive linemen are from, are in that Southeast region. They all want to play in the SEC. You've seen Texas A&M load up on defensive linemen over the years. Their offensive line is usually pretty strong as well. I'd say, especially the SEC West, I think from top to bottom, you're not going to find any weak defensive lines. I would say it's become more finesse over the years with Ole Miss. They have a spread option attack, and their offensive line isn't as strong, but they're able to mask those problems. But their defense has been improved, and as a result, they're a top 15 team in the country that can beat almost anybody they go up against. Mississippi State, they've kind of evolved to an air raid, but they still have a first round left tackle on their offensive line. Their defensive line is always really strong. So Texas probably won't face as many good defensive lines as they did the rest of the season with Arkansas, but that's going to be week in and week out in the SEC. Even if you have more talent, you have more talent at skill positions, you still have to win the battles up front. You look at Kentucky, Mark Stoops has done a great job of building the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball there. They obviously got overmatched against Georgia, but, I think Georgia and Alabama are on such a different level than the rest of the SEC. But if you go from 3 through 12, maybe you set aside Vanderbilt and South Carolina this year, I'd say you'd be in a dogfight more often than not.
Anwar.
Hold up, Ketch. Can I just build on that for a second?
Yeah.
You remember a couple of years ago when Texas had played Notre Dame and beat Notre Dame in that season opener? I think it was the Charlies last year. Notre Dame was ranked at the time. And we said, oh, my God, at that time, that was a huge win. And then when the season was over, we realized that it really wasn't worth it.
Those are two bad teams.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I view Arkansas at this point. Yes, that was a big win at that moment. Arkansas is 4-3. They're 1-3 in the SEC. They are in the bottom of the SEC West right now. So what we thought was a really great team is now in last place in the SEC West. As he's talking, they're 13th in the SEC in sacks. They are fifth in sacks allowed, 12th in tackles for loss allowed, they're ranked, and 9th in tackles for loss, from their standpoint.
And that's with the Texas game baked in.
Yes. So essentially what we're realizing is Texas got manhandled by a really bad Arkansas team, bad by SEC standards, maybe good by Big 12 standards, but by SEC standards, they're still a bad team that's going to have to fight to be, to get to bowl eligibility.
Well,
they're a typical SEC team. I don't think, Texas fans, like you said, they thought Arkansas would be a, elite team this year because of how they played. But as I was saying, that's what you're going to see every single week. Those teams in the middle of the pack are going to give you fits, especially in that line of scrimmage. And as Anwar said, it's not like they're an elite team. They don't have any elite prospects along the defensive line or anything like that, and they're still able to control that game. And I think that has to at least be in the back of your mind if you're a Texas fan as they do transition to that conference.
Well, Anwar, the reason why I brought all this up was that this thing's just not going away. Right. So in the here and the now, Alex wrote a column that 30 minutes before we started recording this Modcast outlined that as bad as Saturday was, it actually was only the third worst offensive line game of the year, which it was like the king of the dog shit or something like that. And I forget exactly how Alex portrayed it, but it wasn't rock bottom, as fate would have it. So here we are, we're having this conversation about, this team's and its limitations and how it impacts, a 4-3 season over the course of the last 5 games. We're going to keep coming back to this, but boy, the thing that's inescapable is this cloud is going to stay here for a while because this offensive line is a long-term problem that needs to be fixed. And, there's going to be debate, I think, for the next 9 months after the season ends about how they can improve the offensive line going into next year, because unlike this year, you can't stand with a pat hand, but just if I'm Texas, I'm not wanting to be in the SEC until our offensive line issues specifically are improved with personnel and ready for that, because this Texas team this year in the SEC, I wonder if they would be bowl eligible this year with the way they'd be getting pushed around. And, a lot of Texas fans are like, is this going to be a 7-5 season, 8-4? But they're going to be playing a lot of teams that can't do to them what a school like even Mississippi or Mississippi State would be able to do up front. And those are run-of-the-mill teams. Arkansas is a run-of-the-mill team. This thing for Texas, it's almost like we should be doing a podcast a week just focused on this one thing. It's so important, and it's going to just keep coming up time and time again.
It's one of the things that, I talked about last year, and I think Alex was one of the guys who was sounding the alarm prior to this season about what this offensive line would look like in the 2021. And Alex would consistently say, he would say, all right, look at the recruiting that has occurred and how they haven't done well. And he was like, man, if they don't find a way to fix it, it's going to be a tough year. And lo and behold, as prophetic as it is tough. And I'm sure Alex would probably say the same thing about 2022. What that potentially looks like when no matter what you think of Kerstetter or Okafor, but when or even Tope Imade, when those guys are gone, who's left to replace them? And unless these coaches place an emphasis on the transfer portal and really start going after guys, and look, we've seen it happen before. We've seen them pull Calvin Anderson out of Rice, and that wasn't a guy that you at the time. We thought like, oh my goodness, you just thought he was a 4-year starter. Well, Calvin Anderson's now pulling checks in the NFL. Parker Braun is another good example.
And he was a good player.
Yeah, just looking for good players and upgrades at the position. So no one's saying you got to look for all-stars or even like the 5-star that Oklahoma was able to get, but just find good players, because if they don't find a way to upgrade and you're saying, okay, you're just going to recruit and develop, okay, what does that offensive line look like until 2024 or 2025? And
why would Arch Manning come here if you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't want to play by bad offensive lines. Like, the worst thing Texas can almost say at this point is we're going to the SEC. Oh God, you want to get me killed? Is that what you want? You want to get Casey?
It's like a chicken and the egg thing, because if he were to come to Texas, I do think he has the, he has the allure of everybody wanting to play with him. I think he would drive in elite offensive line prospects. They had Ernest Green, Malik Abo on campus this past week. The recruiting NATO from Allen, Devon Campbell, all those guys. But like you said, does he want to commit without Texas having an established offensive line? So that is definitely something that could be a concern and could be recruited against Texas.
Hey, Cole, outside of, so everybody knows that Devon Campbell's like the premier option that Texas is like, everybody wants Texas to land Devon Campbell. At least if you're a Texas fan, you should. You'd be crazy not to. But as far as other, like, are there any other reasonable options, like kids you talk to, or just any scuttlebutt that you've heard about any of these guys? Not necessarily dudes that are 5 stars or just even the most high profile of them, but anybody that looks to you like they could have any sort of developmental talent or anything like that, maybe fans could take an interest in looking into, or that we could, they could just provide any semblance of a, you just look at who they've recruited so far this year, and it's, they're good. Are there other good foundational pieces that aren't like the gemstone of a class, like the way that a Devon Campbell would be, that are still available?
Well, Sokomo kind of addressed some of that in his Q&A, and some of the names he mentioned are some of the names I've heard as well. They hosted Malik Abo this past week. He's a Rivals 250 offensive lineman from Washington. He's a guy that was high on Texas over the summer, but for whatever reason that kind of went away. But now he's back on campus. So I think that's pretty big for the staff to get him back in Austin for an official visit. And kind of what we were talking about, the bad offensive line play, I think he saw firsthand, hey, I can step in and perhaps play some significant snaps right away. Ernest Green's another guy that they're seriously in the mix for. He's a top 100 player out from California, but Georgia is trying to make a move there as well. But he's high on Texas. He actually said recently that he was high on Alabama because of the Sarkisian and Kyle Flood, those guys on that staff. So he's high on Texas, can see himself playing there, but Georgia is it's a team that they would have to beat out for. I think those are the top 2 teams, and it seems like Georgia and Texas are kind of going head to head for some big recruits recently in this year's class. And you got, Arch Manning in next year's class and Ruben Owens, that kind of thing. NATO, not really, sorry if I pronounced his name wrong, NATO Umazulu, from Allen. He's
nice try there, Cole. That was at least a better effort than I would have been given.
Being from Allen, you would think I would know how to say it, but I'm not great with names. But he's another guy that he's kind of quiet on the recruiting scene. He kind of keeps to himself. Not a lot of information gets out, but he visited Texas late in the summer. Kind of didn't tell anybody, but got to campus, got to see the facilities, talked to the coaches. I talked to him earlier this season. He told me that he was going to make it back to campus this fall for at least a game, if not an official visit, in both. But I don't think that's happened yet. I don't know if that's been set in stone either. He's a guy who's kind of hard to read. He's visited USC. Some people think he could go out of state, just get away from the state of Texas, whereas other people think that when push comes to shove, he'll stay in state. A&M's another team that's recruiting him pretty hard. But those are some of the.
Well, I mean, here's the thing: Omiazulu, Green, and Agbo. Those are good options. I mean, Texas needs to be on those guys, dude, every day, man. Calling them every day, dude. Jeff Banks needs to give those guys the Devon Campbell treatment.
If you're ever going to cheat with a briefcase full of money, those are the guys that you should be giving briefcases full of money.
I'm telling you, man. Or some kind of Chick-fil-A bag, right? If you want to keep.
Hey, so real quick, I just wanted to say this. Attaboy to Texas for going into the state of Washington and recruiting Malik Agbo, because Alex, I don't know if you'll remember this or not, but I did a breakdown of offensive line recruiting to see which area of the country did the best job of producing NFL players from the offensive line amongst highly rated offensive linemen. And guys out of the state of Washington produced better than any highly recruited guys out of the state of Washington and Oregon. Like this weird little portion of the Northwest.
Lumberjacks, huh?
Those dudes come out and they just perform at much better rates than guys in any other state across the board and kind of their rankings tiers. So if you get a guy like Malik Agbo, who's like a national top 200 guy, his value based on historical success is probably higher than that. For whatever reason, can't get enough highly recruited offensive linemen out of the state of Washington. So probably not a bad idea to get a head coach that's spent some time there, because those dudes can ball on that side of the ball. Sorry, that was a completely random point to make that in retrospect doesn't seem very important.
It could be.
I had a thought. He started talking about Malik Agbo, and I was like, oh, the state of Washington. I haven't said this out loud enough. Anwar, back to you. Just to wrap up this offensive line discussion, because it is the thing that I think we're talking about coming out of the Oklahoma State game, the inability to win the line of scrimmage, the inability to, Oklahoma State was able to marginalize Texas's best weapon and best form of attack because they couldn't do the very basics that would even allow him to get started. Are we at a point with the Texas offensive line where we just need to create a new content piece and call it the offensive line watch? And until the offensive line is fixed, all that article does is talk about transfers and recruits that can help right away. Because I don't know that there's another area of the team where we quite feel that way about, right? Like this defensive line class has got some dudes in it. We don't think the defensive line is completely bare of talent. They don't have anybody that can rush the passer. They're not incapable. it doesn't feel like this offense, like, I don't know. I guess, Anwar, let me ask you this question. Two-parter. One, do we need to create that content piece? And B, how many of the guys that come back next year, Kerstetter's gone, he'd be the main one up front, Denzel Okafor. How many of the guys that return are guys that can be and will be starters on a plus offensive line? And Alex, when he's done, same question to you.
One, yes, we need to start a transfer portal thread right after the season, right? I mean, after the K-State game, then I would say at least that
immediately.
Monday. Yeah. Go ahead and start it. It's going to be a test, Ketch. It's going to be a test for what they're able to do as far as, getting some of those guys, ready from a development standpoint, and how many of those guys are able to really contribute. I'd have to really dig into Alex's grades to see what he's given some of these guys to kind of know where they're trending as at this moment. But this is the easiest way to say it, Ketch. If there were better options available, those guys would probably be playing at this moment.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're not playing at this moment shows that what's behind them is probably not better at this moment, which means like the struggle bus can continue in 2022 and beyond unless they go into the transfer portal and start getting some guys.
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer is Junior Angilau. He's the piece that would be returning to a quality offensive line that you have zero doubts about. I mean, that's the simple answer. That's the true answer. That's the right answer. The other pieces, there are other pieces that will be coming back that you can easily make a bull case for, that you can easily make a bear case for too. And so, I mean, that's the deal. That's just kind of where it is. I'm sorry. I wish it was better news, but the good news is Angilau is going to be back. He's good. He's, he can be part of a good offensive line that would be capable of holding up against the best of the best of your opponents if you had a bunch of guys like him. But the fact of the matter is it takes a bull case to talk about each one of these other guys if you're going to talk about them being at that level.
Real quick on Angilau. The offensive line struggles have been what they've been, and I think it's overshadowed, which has been a really good year for him. He's been a guy that this time last year, I wasn't sure, Alex, if Junior Angilau was going to find a switch that would make him a good offensive lineman, like a good offensive lineman, right? But I feel like this season, the biggest compliment I can give him is it doesn't feel like no one's ever complaining about Junior.
Yep.
He's not allowing these big busts. It doesn't feel like his head is up his ass and he's getting these sloppy penalties. I don't remember hardly at any point this season where I've been like, God, Junior, get your act together. Like he's just been rock solid in the least of this team's problems pretty much all season.
Well, over the course that, I've charted this is my 8th year charting every play from every offensive lineman on this team. And, some of the disruption metrics that I chart, sacks, pressures, quarterback hits, tackles for loss, run stuffs, penalties. I think I named them. Maybe there's something else, but regardless, I count the number of snaps per one of those disruptions and or penalties. And the only guys over the last 7 years who have been better than Junior Angilau as far as the number of snaps per disruption allowed and or penalty incurred were Trey Hopkins, who's still in the NFL in his senior year, over 885 snaps. Connor Williams during his sophomore season, his best season at Texas. Samuel Cosme, who's currently a starter for the Washington football team in his junior season, so his last season. And then strangely, your boy, who deserves some damn respect.
Give him some damn respect.
Taylor Doyle somehow, his junior year, 46.4. But other than that, man, this has been a better year for Angilau than we saw out of like Donald Hawkins in his best year. He collected NFL paychecks for a long time, better than Samuel Cosme as a redshirt freshman. So I think that, I think you're right. The numbers show exactly what you've seen, Ketch. He's not committing well, he's not going out there and being an absolute world beater that are going to have NFL scouts knocking down his door to come out early or anything like that after this season. I do think he's setting up with a really solid year to where if he came back next year and was sort of the leader of this group and had one of these big seasons where he things really came together for him, especially with Bijan back. If some of those highlight Bijan runs could come behind big nasty blocks from that dude, you could see him getting a lot of national exposure and turn into a guy that could be a relatively higher draft pick than we think of him today. He's setting up well through the course of this season for sure.
Attaboy, Junior Angilau. Yeah. In the event that it sounds like all we've done is bitch all day about the offensive line, we're making sure that everybody knows Junior Angilau not in the at the center of this team's problems on that side of the ball. Hasn't allowed a run stuff all season long, which seems,
crazy.
It feels like the kind of thing you say about all Americans and not.
I didn't even realize that.
So
413 snaps and no run stuffs.
That's pretty crazy. Cole, I'm coming back to you, although Anwar, I want everybody's thoughts on this. Jaden Blue, we're at a point with the Texas running back commitment who, everybody knows Jaden Blue is previously to his rankings plummet in pretty much every recruiting service after announcing that he wasn't going to play his senior season. He's not playing this year. He's been one of the most talked about recruits that the Longhorns have had committed to them all season long. And now there's been buzz and sources confirming to rivals.com this week that he's been reevaluating his commitment to Texas. And reevaluating sounds like a fancy way of saying he's trying to figure out which of his offers elsewhere are still committable, which might not be as many as he thinks, which is why this may all amount to nothing and that there's a little bit of buzz right now. I know that Sam Spiegelman from rivals.com reported on our board yesterday that a final resolution was expected in the next 24 hours-ish. What? Anwar, I'll actually come to you first. Is there anything that Texas should do here? Or is this just another day in the life of recruiting and we should just sit back and let this thing play out and not overreact?
The latter. I think at the end of the day, if Jaden Blue is watching Bijan Robinson and not envisioning what he can do in this kind of offense, I don't know. I think two things. One, it's recruiting. Two, Jaden is not playing this year. It's not like he's getting a lot of shine. It's not like he's getting a lot of attention. There's no way for him to create attention. There's no way to get the love because no one's talking about the games that you're playing in. No one's talking about, everyone's like, all right, see you later. I'm not saying he's doing it on purpose in order to create something, but that'd be a little boring. Just a little boring at times. So I just think it's probably if you're Stan Drayton, you've got to be confident in your ability to recruit. You remind them that Bijan is probably going to be in New York at the end of the year. Where do you want to be? And so you can get caught up in what A&M did with the Alabama win and see if he can get fit in there, or he can stay the course. But if I'm Texas, I don't overreact to it. I just let it play out and assume and hope that at the end of the day you're good.
Paul, anything you hearing on this? Any takes on this? When we bring this topic up, what's coming to mind for you?
Yeah, Sam did a great job reporting what he's hearing. I reached out to Jaden himself, and neither one of us got any kind of, response. And usually that's kind of a red flag. If something wasn't up, I feel like they would at least shut it down a little bit. But like you said, Sam kind of reported that it's supposed to be whatever the resolution is, it's supposed to be, out there in 24 hours. So maybe we hear something today, end of this week. So we'll see there. But yeah, kind kind of what Anwar said. Maybe he's wanting to create some drama. Maybe he wants some attention that some of his peers are having because he's not playing this season. Maybe he kind of misses the hearing from coaches from different schools and recruiting him hard and everything like that. But at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, what running back would not want to play in the offense that's featuring Bijan Robinson right now? You know, he's probably going to be in New York. He's set to be a first-round pick next year. The offense, plays to his strengths really well. But he's not the only running back committed in this class. Texas also has Jamarian Miller out of Tyler Legacy, who, I mean, he might be just as good, if not better, than Jaden Blue. You know, just because he's that good. He's a guy that's gonna break the school record in rushing yards at Tyler Legacy. He's like a touchdown waiting to happen. Can score from anywhere on the field. Sarkisian and staff made Miller a priority as well. In the event that something does happen with Jaden Blue, if he does decommit, there's some smoke that maybe they turn their attention to D'Anthony Gatson out of Newton, Texas. He was the guy that Texas was recruiting before he committed to USC. He decommitted from USC with their coaching search now going on. There's some uncertainty there. Maybe they, turn their focus to him. Maybe they try to get him to stay in state. And if they do want a 2 running back class to complement Miller and Blue decommits. But yeah, I mean, I think it makes the most sense for him to stay in the class. Like you said, maybe not all his options are on the table anymore. Other classes are filling up. Some teams have turned their attention away to other prospects, things of that nature. Kind of what Anwar was saying, if you don't want to play in this offense with what Bijan Robinson is doing right now, I don't think it's a huge loss for Texas, considering they do have Miller committed, already in the boat. They have Brooks in the pipeline as well, who was big time in high school. I think they'll have some options if something were to happen with Blue, but obviously that is a guy you would like to have on your roster.
You'd love to have. Yeah, I would personally feel a great sense of loss if Jaden Blue didn't come to Texas, man. I love his film. His subtle highlights are something else, man. But I can certainly understand, I can certainly understand the consternation from fans. And I mean, look, man, Jamarion is really good too. He's really good too. But man, Jaden, I mean, God, he's something special. I don't know.
Ketch, if I was advising Jaden Blue, the word I would tell him, or words or phrase I would tell him is be careful. You already have a certain segment.
You don't want to seem too flaky with all this.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. You already decided to skip your senior year of high school, and there's people maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that's the norm, and no one thinks twice about it. And maybe it's kind of like how in basketball, when you stay around for your senior year in college basketball, no one thinks you're good. So maybe everyone starts skipping their senior high schools 10 years from now because anyone who plays their senior year of high school is not good. I mean, maybe that's the new norm. But, you still have people have a notion or a perception of these young men who are skipping their senior years of high school. Then if you skip your senior year of high school and then you decide to decommit, it adds a little bit of a layer to that. I just don't know if you really want to put that on yourself so young in life, heading into campus where coaches may have a certain preconceived notion of you, players may have a notion of you, fans may have that, and that adds into a lot of pressure. You start looking at the guy like a guy that if things don't go your way, you're going to be the first guy that goes into the transfer portal. Like it just, if I was him and I was advising him, I would just say, man, you're good with Texas. Get there on campus, do what you got to do. Don't do all this right now.
2 things. Ironically, it's not that Texas A&M doesn't like Jaden Blue. The word on the street is that they're turned off by the not playing in his senior year too. So it turns out that had he played his senior year, there's probably a very good chance that his buzz would exist in a way that if he wanted to peel off and go to Texas A&M, for instance, that door might be open. But the word on the street is that the door is not open, if that's a door he wanted to explore, and it's shut for reasons that are ironically connected to the thing that he thought was protecting him has actually probably done him, whether it's fair or not, I don't know, but it's certainly done him a disservice, fair or not fair. And the other thing is, the thing I worry about with Jaden, and Alex, I'm like you, man, in terms of high school football tape, like that dude's tape
so good.
says that in a world where he goes to the right school in the right situation, he has a chance to have a phenomenal college football career. However, Texas is deep at running back. And
I mean, Cole even mentioned Jonathan Brooks, and we forget about 24. He's pretty sick, dude. Like,
no, exactly.
So
I didn't mean from a talent perspective. I just meant they have some bodies. You know, they have Miller. They got Gatson as a backup option. But yeah, you're right, Alex and Ketch. Blue's an incredible player.
But he shows up 5th or 6th on the depth chart next year as a true freshman. I mean, depending on
be in the back of his mind, you know,
depending on who between him and Miller emerges as the lead guy in that class, they've got to climb over 4 guys that the coaching staff will be like, okay, those are Bijan's final year, Roshan's final year, Keelan Robinson in a 3rd year with that staff, but 2nd year at Texas. And then again, Brooks, who, boy, I mean, the only thing keeping that guy from playing more is he's got 3 guys in front of him that are all really good. So it's not an indictment on either Miller or Blue that they would arrive next year and need to be patient. My concern with Blue is if he comes to Texas, he fits the profile of a guy that will look at the depth chart in October and November and say, this isn't working out for me, and wants to be in the portal. And then Anwar, you've got a guy who sat out his senior year, and he screams portal, like, if there's a guy entering campus as someone who's on portal watch, if you're 5th string and skipped your senior year in high school, that by itself probably puts you into the category of need to keep an eye on him. So
it's like Javon Shepherd, you know,
a little bit.
You know, just like as soon as he hit campus, we were like, all right, let's see how long this lasts. You know,
it's like there's a clock.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot he was even on campus for a little while. I forgot he was even on campus
because it really was a short period of time. Yeah,
you know, and who was the D tackle that ended up going to Missouri? That was Texas. It was Oklahoma. Jordan Elliott.
Yeah.
You know, there are just certain guys. And look, that dude's in the NFL right now, right? So it's not an indictment on his ability at all. And it just as it wouldn't be with Blue, but you know, I think fans that are like yank his scholarship need to shut the hell up, because I think Anwar touched on it. There are things that happen day in and day out, and you don't want to know how the sausage is made. You just want the 5 stars to show up. You guys don't want to know about how much ass kissing and babysitting and like delicate like feelings have to be taken. That stuff is so normal that they call that Thursday in college football and the coaching staffs. If you're going to yank scholarships away from every guy who has second thoughts, you're going to be in trouble, just to say the least. Fellas, I'm looking at the clock. Let's go into parting shots. Let's wrap this thing up. And Cole, since you're new, I'm not going to just like throw parting shots at you on a dime and be like, you have to give us the first parting shot. Instead, I'm going to do that to Alex. But since I've done like 4 videos with Anwar this week, I'm going to pay him the solid of letting him gather himself, get ready for his parting shot. Although I think he actually is ready.
I actually already have it. I sent everyone.
You're right. So you know what? I take it back. Alex, you don't have to go first. Anwar actually has his parting shot ready to go.
My parting shot's ready to go. My parting shot, I sent all you guys a DM on Slack.
Yes.
The thing is, Chris Beard, you're officially on the clock. And not for any of the reasons that you're thinking, Chris Beard. Here's what I got to tell you, Chris. My 3-year-old is getting attention from the Oklahoma Sooners. I hate to tell it to you, Chris. I know he's in your own backyard, but as a basketball player, my 3-year-old is starting to get some attention. Okay, here's what happened, Chris. I'm letting you know. First of all, from a recruiting perspective, I know somebody who showed one of the assistant coaches the film of my 3-year-old dribbling a basketball and doing different things, told them different clips. And they kept watching and kept watching and kept watching. And what was relayed back to me was, hey, man, that kid is really, really good for his age. He's a guy we got to start keeping some tabs on at some point. Chris, now, here's the thing, Chris. I'm telling you, Chris. So my oldest son just started training at Skyhook Academy up in Pflugerville. Shout out to Coach Carlos, who was out there. He was at Round Rock. They really liked him a lot. So we went over at Skyhook. On last week we started, and they saw my youngest kid out there dribbling, and they go, how old is he? And I was like 3. And they're like, is he like 3 about to turn 4? And I'm like, nah, I just turned 3 back in June. And I'm like, can we train him? So they started training him out there, and he's out there running these drills with all these kids, scooting, dribble left and right, going through chairs. Now, he can't make a shot at this point, but they're videoing him.
He's Ben Simmons.
Oh, God. Don't curse him, Ketch. Don't curse him. The only way he's leaving is if he doesn't get Oreos or his Capri Suns. Like, that's the only thing he's going to be a little upset about. So he's been training out there. I'm just letting you know, Chris Beard, you're fish on. There's a kid in Cedar Park who OU's looking at right now. I'm just letting you know, Chris, if you want some action, that's it. Or if not, I'm going to live. He's 3. So I got 15 more years so I can write a story about how you blew it in recruiting and you had the opportunity. I sent all the guys a video of him dribbling. This was this morning, of him just dribbling straight with no looking down. Chris, you're on the clock.
I kind of feel like you are getting everybody's hopes up. He feels like a G leaguer or like straight to pro prospect. I don't know that he's spending a day in college based on his talent, based on the fact that at 3, he really is quite special at 3. My kid's 7 and couldn't remotely do that. So yeah, just for those that aren't looking at the videos that we're looking at, I think there's a good chance that we won't know the NBA draft entry rules for like 2035.
I don't know. I hope I live long enough.
There's a whole lot of like CBAs that will be altered and agreed to and written before then. But like, yeah, cookies in what's his beverage of choice?
Capri Sun.
Just so you know, it seems a pretty cheap investment into a guy who you might, otherwise give more than some. So there will be schools out there that want to give that kid more than Oreos and Capri Suns.
He's gonna be held in the YMCA league in another 2 years. I can tell you that. I feel like a poor man's LeVar Ball right now because I'm like, my oldest will be okay. Like my oldest will probably be good enough to play in high school, and I'm happy with that. The youngest, though, he's going to be the guy you got to watch out for. LeVar Ball-esque. I understand it, but I've done this long enough to know the talent, the drive. He practices all the time. I'm telling you, Chris, and you got some. I'm just telling you, you ain't going to have a lot of time.
By the way, I love that Chris Beard has given up beer for this season. He made everybody on the team. I saw on Twitter. I don't know that this is true. I just saw it on Twitter, so it has to be that everybody on the team had to give up something that was important to them during the season, and he's given up beer. And Alex, I can't help but think of your photo on your avatar of him hanging out at some chicken shit bingo Sunday. And it's gonna be hard for him.
Yeah, it'd be. I think it would be hard for anybody.
Yeah, imagine if Ketch asked us that at the beginning of the season. All right, guys, I want you guys to give up something important to you so we can make it through this coverage. I'm like, God, help us.
If you say, Ketch, you got to give up the rogue apothecary, though, I'd be like, okay, I was just kidding. I was just kidding. Do as you like. Alex, you got a parting shot?
Yeah, well, geez, I can't follow up on Anwar. It's just like he's signing his kid up for max contracts, and the NBA at 3 years old. I'm signing my kid up for like cauliflower ears and all kinds of messed up body parts in his jiu-jitsu classes, I guess. Goes to show who's smart. Hey, Anwar, do you have did you change the color of your accent wall behind you?
Yes.
The paint?
Thank you, Alex, for noticing. Yes, I did get my place painted.
Oh, so that's what I was going to ask. If you got it painted or if you did it yourself. If you got
No, I got my place painted. So like what you can't see. So that's there. And then if you went here, all down here is like kind of
I like it.
The wall painting. So I have the accent wall here, and then I have the accent wall different places within the house.
Thank you for the tour.
Looks good.
It's including on the stairs, by the way, which I would definitely do a tour, but I did feel like it would just be like a real poor man's version of MTV Cribs, and
Hang in there, Anwar. Those kids are gonna get you on Cribs yet.
The youngest one definitely will.
So for my parting shot, it'll be quick and easy. I won't have a deep dig to do next week. And so if there's anybody, I've done this successfully on the message boards a million times. I figured I might be able to do it just here on the Modcast with the YouTube reach. You can find me on Twitter at Alex Dunlap NFL. If you have any hunting land or a lease or any place like that where you have access deer available and you wouldn't mind me coming and just taking a doe, I don't want a big buck. I don't want any of that stuff. But if you just have land, I'll come in there. I'll close all the gates. I won't leave any trash. I mean, we could hang out. I'm very responsible. We could hang out. You could just let me in, whatever you wanted to do. I would bring you bourbon, bring you beer, whatever it was that you would need just for a little bit of access to the land. I'm very responsible. Like I said, shut all the gates behind me, leave the land cleaner than I came and I found it. Again, I'm on Twitter at Alex Dunlap NFL.
What if they don't have Twitter? What about what's the email address they can email you at?
Or you can email me, Alex at rosterwatch.com, rosterwatch.com. And yes, I would love to meet you, love to see your place. And I'll leave my parting shot.
And this has worked out for you before.
It's worked out extremely well. Yeah.
Why he's begging in this video, because the last time he did this, it worked out really well for him. Like the power of Orange Bloods, I think. We'll find out what the power of YouTube is, Alex, but the power of Orange Bloods has been good to you. Cole, you got a parting shot?
We should do that one. Can we do that for a parting shot one day? Like all of us ask for something that we want and see who we can
Christmas.
get.
You know what? We'll do that first. Alex may have already used his up, but we'll do it for Christmas.
Okay.
And we'll sell it as this is what you could get us for Christmas if you really like the drunk uncle. Here's how here's how you can like him even more. Cole, do you have a parting shot?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to follow those two, putting me on the spot. But I guess my parting shot is kind of two things. It's been cool to make my debut on the Modcast. It's been awesome couple months with the Orange Bloods. It's been enjoyable. Got to travel to Louisiana. Got to be down in New Orleans. Got to cover a lot of great recruits. So I just want to say thank you all for giving me
your Arch Manning piece went viral.
It did. New York Post got it. I saw a bunch of. I expected the tweet to get some love, but I did not expect the New York Post to pick it up at all.
There you go, man. Cheers, dude. That's great.
The lesson to be learned there, Alex, is just stalk Arch Manning every week. You could be. Who's the guy on ESPN? You could be Windhorst.
The way. Oh yeah. What a career that guy made.
Good career. That actually leads into my second parting shot, I guess, was, going down to New Orleans covering Arch Manning. We might as well end the podcast on a high note, give some Texas fans a positive feel. Anwar also reported that on Arch Manning over the weekend, he had a great time in Austin, with the coaching staff. He came in on Friday. He got to spend some time with, some of the other top recruits that Texas is recruiting, Evan Stewart, Jonte Cook, those kind of guys. The Texas staff did a great job of getting them all around together, and they're really selling them on playing with one another. And I think that's, really setting in with them. They saw firsthand how Texas does need some more playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. to close out those games against Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. So I don't think losing those 2 games hurts their chances with Arch too much. Obviously, I don't think they can, go 6-6 and expect to get him. But at the end of the day, I don't think record or win or loss or whatever is going to play too big of a factor in his recruitment, just because, Peyton went to Tennessee. They weren't winning, national championships before he got there. Eli Manning went to Ole Miss. I know they had that family connection, but it's not like they were a powerhouse either. So I think Texas is in great shape with Arch Manning, going down to New Orleans, talking to Arch himself, to his coach, a couple of sources. They all said the same thing, that, Steve Sarkisian's done a great job of building that relationship. He's done a great job of recruiting him and his teammate Will Randall, who's also a pretty good recruit in his own right. I think Texas is right there in the thick of things for Arch Manning. I know that's the story that all Texas fans are keeping up with and following and wanting more and more news of. And I think Texas, as of today, has a great chance. I don't think there's a school ahead of them. I think Georgia's probably right there with them, but I wouldn't put any school ahead of them. I think Texas has a great shot of getting what would he be, like the most important recruit for Texas since Vince Young? Where would y'all say he fits in that equation?
Oh God.
Oh, that's a catch question. Yeah, that's a catch. Yeah.
I mean, Garrett Gilbert was the number 1 quarterback in the country and a 5-star back in 2000. Actually, I don't know if he was number 1. He was a 5-star. So yeah, Arch. I mean, you're talking about the number 1, number 2 recruit in the country. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go back to Vince Young.
Yeah. He's got the
Certainly,
Manning
God.
factor as well. He's got
The
the
name, though. I
publicity,
mean, when you say Manning,
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty.
Yeah, buddy.
It pretty much checks all the boxes, doesn't it?
You could make a case you'd have to go back to Sims. That as big as Vince was, they weren't. The New York Post wasn't aggregating Vince Young's story content when he was a junior in high school. So I mean,
That's fair, yeah.
whereas Chris Sims had an NFL document, like an NFL Films documentary about him when he was a high school senior, like him and his dad. Like that was, you probably have to go back to Sims to legitimately capture Arch Manning.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Is it time for me and my parting shot?
Sounds
Fellas, today, allegedly,
it ain't happening. They're not gonna show up on time.
Allegedly is the end of the Ashley Furniture saga today. Allegedly. They have been by the house multiple times since the last podcast, Modcast, where we discussed this. Both times showing up with incomplete beds. No railings, no panels, things that have kept the beds from being fully delivered. And I don't know how the rest of you would treat this. I've sent incomplete beds back to the warehouse both times that they've showed up, because the idea of just leaving bed parts in my house sounds exactly the way I can get blamed for something. When the parts all show up, then it's like, well, where's this? We left it at your house 17 weeks ago. How come you don't? So every time they've showed up and haven't had the full beds, I've sent them back. Today is supposed to be the end of the saga. I hate Ashley Furniture. Part of me wants to set the beds on fire as soon as they show up. They made my wife cry last week when they showed up, because she's telling the kids, you're finally going to have a bed. You're finally going to have a bed. This is your last night without a bed. You don't have to sleep on the couch or we've been like for months, because just so you know, we had beds for the kids until the very first delivery date was scheduled. And, the thing you're supposed to do when something shows up is have the other stuff out of the way. So I did that, and I will never do that again. From now on, all furniture will remain in the house until delivery is completed.
You got to get the bird in hand.
Yes. I set my birds in hand free, and then it turns out there weren't any in the bush. So today's supposed to be the end of the Ashley Furniture saga. I do not feel like I made any headway in my attempt to climb the regional and national ladder to complain about the bastards on 45 in spring at that Ashley Furniture. Do not ever go there. The manager is a slug and quite frankly doesn't have the intellectual capacity to tie both of his shoes correctly before being confused about what he was going to do before he started to tie his shoes. But today, the saga is allegedly going to end. And when it does, we can finally put a ribbon and bow on the great Ashley Furniture Ketchum saga of 2021, which started like June 10th, and we're almost to Halloween, just over some shitty bunk bed kids. Come on.
The fact that you can't get through to anyone on the upper level shows how bad that they are, that they've shielded themselves from complaints because they know they get so many, they've made it so complex for you to even reach the right people.
When I went there the last time and got into like a shouting argument, not really shouting, but I let him know how I felt. The guy was like, I can just cancel your order. Cause he was like, and I was like, well, no, I've waited. I know I can cancel the order. I've waited months and months and months, and you're always, it's like Lucy and the football. It probably will happen again today. But when I went in there, his whole thing was, I get so many orders. You really think I'm going to worry about yours? So if you ever want to go buy something at a place where they remotely care about your purchase, don't go to Ashley Furniture. The manager literally told me to my face, they get so much business, they don't have to give a shit. Which, that'd be nice, wouldn't it? If on Orange Bloods, we just had so many damn subscribers that when they complain, just like, go ahead. All of you cancel. We're rolling in the cash. But yeah, no. So Ashley Furniture, come correct today, and I'll say something nice on Twitter, maybe something. For myself and Alex and Anwar and Cole Patterson, who filled in capably for Jason Sukamel today while he's in Big Sky Country avoiding bears and apparently eating chili with beans in them. Who knew that Montana was communist? Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Alex, I'm glad you enjoyed that. And ring the bell so you can get notifications every time the Modcast comes out on Thursdays. You won't have to wait for us to link it. The notifications will let you know. Until next week, you guys be good to each other. There are no games this week. There's no reason to be on tilt on Saturday. Enjoy yourselves. Be good to each other. We'll talk to you next week.